Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Palau Alliance webinar. My name's David Jones, and with me here at the Palau offices is your NGA Alliance team of Dr. Jim Williams, Jeff Piper, Amy Atkinson, and Courtney Bannister. And since its inception in 1998, this alliance has now grown to over 450 members, all sharing the same message of salvation through Jesus Christ. And we're here to serve you and to serve each other. And we do that by sharing experiences, our knowledge, sharing practical help with each other, as well as seeking opportunities to multiply our impact for Jesus Christ by working together. We're really about collaboration and finding opportunities where, as evangelists, we can team up and serve each other and work together. Before I introduce our webinar presenter today, I've asked Jeff Piper to open this webinar in prayer.
Thanks, Dave. Lord, we just thank you so much for the opportunity to come together as brothers and sisters in Christ to learn and grow in our ministry so that we can continue to share the good news of Jesus Christ across the street and around the world. So, Lord, we thank you for that. Dedicate this time to you, and thank you so much for Bradley Burke sharing his wisdom and his experience and his knowledge with us. Pray that you would continue to pour out favor upon his ministry and his life and his family. And we just love you so much today, Jesus, and we pray in the powerful name of Christ Jesus. Amen.
Amen, amen. Thanks, Jeff. Well, our webinar topic today is Fundraising with the Devil in Your Ear. And our presenter is Bradley Burke, president of Burke Communications. Bradley has extensive experience in fundraising and has led donor communications programs for some of our Alliance members, including evangelist Luis Palau and Mike Silva and Scott Dawson. Time permitting, we'll take a few questions at the end of the webinar, and if you have a question, you should be able to send that to us by noting your question in the question box on your computer screen. I'll now turn the webinar over to today's presenter, Bradley Burke.
Hey everybody, it is great to be with you today. What an opportunity to be working with people with a heart and a passion to tell people about Jesus. This is my heart's call too, so my sharing with you is me talking to myself. So I'm telling you things that I have to remind myself as a fundraiser of every day. These are the same struggles that I'm going to share with you, are the same struggles that for the last 15 years I've had to deal with in the work that I do. And in the last 15 years I've met with a bunch of evangelists who are in start mode or in kind of that early phases of their ministry. I've worked with a lot of different ministries that are in this kind of startup mode, and what I hear a lot of the things that I'm going to share with you. And the main message that I want to get across to you today is that you have to change your mindset. And I think a lot of people come into the world of ministry thinking that they get to do this great thing called ministry, and that this idea of fundraising is so not spiritual, and it's just we have to do this. And it's that mindset, it's directly the heart of that holds ministries back. It takes you away from the work of telling people about Jesus Christ, because the thing that shuts ministries down is lack of resources. It's the one of the main things that takes people who are into evangelism out of the work of evangelism. And so I want to go right to the heart of what we're talking about today. I'm going to give you some tactics and some tools and some things you need to do to improve your fundraising, but I want to get into your mindset, and I want to challenge your belief systems. And ultimately, I want to ask you to, same thing that you do on a daily basis is, I want you to convert. I want you to change your mindset. I want you to give up who you were and take on a new role to advance the kingdom. And so we're going to go right at that. And so the devil uses all kinds of things to distract you from the work that has to be done to raise the resources so you can go tell people about Jesus. And the biggest lie that the devil tells people is he says, oh, just do what George Mueller did. And for those of you who don't know who George Mueller is a just hugely famous Christian man, took care of so many orphans, it's unbelievable, shared the gospel at every opportunity. And one of the stories about George Mueller is that he never asked anybody for money. He just did it by praying, and he never talked about money. And some of that is true, and some of it is just hype and myth. And the devil takes this story of just an amazing godly man who raised so much money for the kingdom, and he twists it. And in our modern day culture, we've taken a part of that story, and we said, well, I'm just going to take this part of that story, and that's what I'm going to hold on to, and that's what I'm going to use as my model for fundraising. Well, the part of the story that nobody tells you is that George Mueller wrote hundreds of thousands of letters in his lifetime. Tens of thousands of them he wrote handwritten personally to people. George Mueller was one of the greatest storytellers to ever walk the face of the earth. And George Mueller had an ability to, when he talked to you or he wrote to you, for you to begin to see yourself in his ministry and doing the work that he was doing. And so, thus, people said, oh, I want to be a part of that and give money. And so my challenge to you is, if you're going to hold on to the George Mueller idea, do the George Mueller idea. You better be talking to a lot of people, you better be writing lots of letters, and you better tell stories that draw your people in and just capture their hearts. Because that is development. That is what we do. We tell stories, we challenge people to get involved. And so if you're going to do George Mueller, you better do George Mueller right, and you better do your research on who George Mueller was, what George Mueller did. And the other thing is George Mueller had a special kind of ministry that he dedicated himself wholly to. And a lot of times the ministry that we practice in the United States is very different from what George Mueller did. So if you're going to hold on to that, you better do that. And the problem is the devil uses pieces of that to hold you back from your real ministry and say, oh, all I need to do is pray. Well, yes, you do need to pray, but you also need to be doing these other things. The next lie that the devil uses to distract you is asking people for money isn't godly, or it isn't spiritual. It's some things those other people do, those development people do. And, my challenge to that is, so you're telling me that David wasn't godly. You're telling me that Nehemiah wasn't godly. You're telling me that Moses wasn't godly. You're telling me that the Apostle Paul was not a spiritual man. No. Go back and read the Bible. I'm going to provide these verses for you later on in the presentation. Every single one of those people I mentioned asked people for money. They asked lots of people. Moses told the nation of Israel, called it out, go back to your tents and get your gold and your jewels and your valuables and bring them. Bring them. That's probably one of the first recorded cases of fundraising. He told the people, go get your money, bring it. We're going to give it to God. David called the people of Israel out to bring money for the temple. Nehemiah asked the king for money to rebuild the walls. Now, if you think you're scared or fundraising frightens you because you have to go talk to a donor and ask them for money, think about the fact that the donor that Nehemiah asked for those resources probably could have killed him just for talking to him. So these people were godly people. God used them, God inspired them, and they spoke and they involved people in the ministry that God called them to do. And we're going to talk more about this idea of spirituality and fundraising in just a little bit. But this is a great lie that the devil tells you is that this fundraising thing doesn't have anything to do with ministry. No, I think we need to rethink that and go back and read the Bible and begin to think about how God uses people and how God brings resources to bear to do the things that He wants to do in the kingdom. So I think I hit point 3 there. So and then asking someone to support your ministry is begging, and this one is classic because I've heard this over and over again. I feel like I'm begging. Well, this has to do with your understanding of money, and it has to do with your understanding of self-sufficiency. And this idea, especially in our culture, where we have this idea that we have to be self-sufficient, like, I don't want to owe another man anything. Well, that is completely different than what we're talking about here. You're asking someone else to do God's work. And that is the opposite of begging. You're asking them to partner with you in the work that God has called you to do. Now, if you do fundraising really poorly, it can feel like begging. And we're going to talk about how to separate the mindset. But begging is a mindset that you're asking someone, oh, I have to do this, and will you please help me? I'm so poor, I can't do it. No, you're not begging. You're asking someone to be involved in God's work, which is completely different. How you ask is important, and we're going to talk about that so you don't ever feel like you're begging. So the other lie the devil tells you is, hey, you're no good with people. You know, and the idea here is that we have to be some three-piece suit, Rolex wearing, nice pin guy to go out and ask people to shake and bake and, hey, you know, would you give some money to this? You know, that becomes the mindset of people that are in ministry who haven't done a lot of fundraising, is that, oh, I'm not good at sales, or I'm not that person or that woman. That woman just, you know, she can just connect with people. Well, you know what? This is what Moses said to God. He said, I'm not eloquent. I can't talk to people. And God said, you don't have to, buddy. I'm going to talk through you. And this idea that the devil uses that to tell us that we don't have the right, or we don't have the skill set to go talk to people, it is a lie from the devil, and we need to put it behind us, and we need to go forward, and we'll talk about this. When you know what you're talking about, and you know, and you're passionate about what you're talking about, and God has given you the authority to talk about these things, you're better to talk about it than any slick salesman out there. And so that's a lie that the devil uses. So the other one that I hear all the time, and I think probably all of you are out there thinking, if I could just hire a development person, I wouldn't have to do this work anymore. First of all, there's all kinds of problems with that. So when you hire a development person, it takes about 3 to 5 years for them to actually pay for themselves. So, you know, it's not a great solution, especially for a lot of ministries who are smaller. The other problem with it is that fundraising is about relationships, and because you've started the ministry and you've been doing the work and the relationships are yours, handing those relationships off to other people is a very tricky process. And a lot of times what happens is that you alienate your donors when you do this. And, you know, there is a time when you get to a couple of $1 million a year, you need to hire a development person, just because because you've been so good at fundraising, right? The number of people that are in your life, you just can't manage all of the relationships. Well, I seriously doubt any of you are there. And when you get a mailing list of 800 people and you have a major donor list of, let's say, 80 to 150 that are giving you a couple of $1,000s a year, then let's talk about hiring a development person, and then let's be real strategic about hiring that development person and not just hiring anybody for it, because that's another mistake that people can make. So this is a lie from the devil that, I could just get to the point where I could hire a development person, I wouldn't have to do this terrible work of development anymore. Well, no, that mindset is absolutely opposite of where you need to be in your mindset. These are relationships, and God has given you these relationships, and you have an opportunity to minister to these people. I don't want to get ahead of myself. We're going to come back to that. The other great one that I hear all the time from people, and they say it jokingly, but you know that they mean it deep down in their heart, is, I wish I just had a major donor to come fund this thing. It would all be okay then. I could do whatever I wanted. Well, the answer to that is there may be a major donor in your life. And that person may or may not come to you. If you don't ever do the work of building relationships and doing fundraising and doing development, you will not get a major donor in your life, because And anybody who's ever tells you stories about the major donors that have given to their ministry, those are based on relationships. A lot of them have taken a lot of time to develop over the years. They've cultivated, they've been in those people's lives. And so major donor work is about relationship. And if you're not doing the work of relationship building, if you're not really engaging a lot of different people, those major donors are probably not going to come into your life. The other problem with that is that, and I know a lot of ministry leaders will tell you this, is that the major donor that's funding their ministry is the biggest pain in their butt that they've ever had, because that person is trying to tell them how to run their ministry. And because they're giving all the money, you as the ministry leader is somewhat beholden to them. And that is a terrible, terrible position to be in. And I've actually had clients just say, you know what, I don't care what the major donor says anymore, because I'd rather do ministry than be told from this person how to do ministry. So yes, there are major donors out there for you, and I want you to know that, but you got to do the work. And this goes into the next one, and that I hear a lot of people say is, oh, if I could just be like Billy Graham or Luis Palau, you know, if you're a music person, I don't know who or an art person, I don't know who the right person is to say here, but the idea is those guys, they just, you know, preaching to huge crowds and raising a lot of money. Well, the first thing I say about Billy Graham is, you're not Billy Graham. Nobody's Billy Graham. So just take that off the plate, put it away, and say, that guy's really amazing. God bless him to do something really impressive, but nobody's Billy Graham. Take a look at Luis Palau, and Luis Palau has spent, I don't know, 40 years developing relationships with people. I mean, the man is fantastic with people, and he connects with people, and he loves people, right? And so when you meet him, you connect with him, and he early in his ministry did a great job of connecting with people who had resources and loved him and appreciated him, and they came along with him. And that part and parcel allows him to do very large festivals. So this idea that, oh, you're just going to be like, if I could just be like one of these guys. Well, there's a lot of work behind doing what they do. There's a lot of years and years and years of cultivation and fundraising and heartache that went into being where they're at now. So the next lie that the devil tells you is, if you just put together a good plan, or you hired this consultant, they'll give you a good plan, and if you just execute it, everything will be fine. Well, yes and no, because a good plan is good and very important to have, but the mindset behind a good plan, you have to have a lot of prayer and a lot of thinking and a lot of heart behind the plan. And then I have a couple of clients that do this, but I write these really amazing fundraising plans for them in October and November and say, okay, you're going to go to this state on this month, and you're going to go visit this donors on this month. We've got a whole year mapped out of how they're going to, you know, go speak at different places and talk to people, and they don't execute the plan. There's every excuse in the world to not go on these trips or go visit these donors. And so just putting together a good plan is not the answer. You have to have the heart, and this is why I'm talking about this, is if your mindset is stuck in some thinking that makes it really hard to do fundraising, then having a good plan is going to be really hard to execute, because you're not going to want to do it. You're going to have your mindset doesn't allow you to think about fundraising as something that's going to allow you to go forward. The next lie is that, hey, you don't have to give to this. You don't have a lot of money right now. You know, you're just barely making it. You don't have to give to this. And I think that is just bunk. I think it's crap. Forgive my language, because I know I'm talking to a bunch of preachers here, but it really is. I mean, here's the thinking, is if you're going to go ask somebody to give to something, you better darn well have written a pretty good check for it yourself. And here's what I've learned over the years, too, is that when I started, I remember my first weeks at Luis Palau back in '99 or something like that. You know, I was working in fundraising. I was like, I don't even give to this organization. I don't even know what I'm supposed to be doing, you know. And the more I got around people who are givers, the more I realized, like, there's great joy in this. And so my challenge to you is don't just give to your organization. Become generous. Become hilarious in your giving to it. And just watch what God does to that, because once you start giving to something and you're giving really sacrificial to it, more than just your time, I'm talking about your resources. When you do that, your heart goes into this thing in a new way, and you have a new ability to talk to people. So I want to, the idea that you don't have to give or just give a little, get rid of that. Get in this thing deep. The other thing is that you don't have time for this. I remember I had this great, they did an NGA conference a couple of, maybe 99, I think, and I was talking to an NGA evangelist, and I said, you need to spend 50% of your time raising money and the other 50% of the time out doing evangelism. And this look of just shock rolled across his face, and he was like, he was thinking about it, and about an hour later I saw him talking to another evangelist, and he said, do you believe this guy told me that I don't have time to go spend 50% of my time raising money? Who could do that? And I thought to myself, it's that kind of mindset that's going to hold this evangelist back from doing all that God has called him to do, because he doesn't see the work of development as fundraising and fundraising as ministry. And here's what I mean by that is that the real work of development is about relationships. And if you don't spend an inordinate amount of your time being in relationship with people, then you're missing out on the connection with them, and it's that connection that's ultimately going to unlock their hearts and their resources. And so this idea that you don't have time to do it, and this is something the devil will get you to do. I mean, I've got clients that like, oh, I've got to go work on the books, or I need to go do this, or I need to go do that, rather than going and making their phone calls. I mean, this is classic. This is what I spend the majority of my time doing with people is, no, go make phone calls. And it's because of this mindset that's deeply embedded in them that the work of fundraising isn't ministry. When what I want you to do is I want you to get on the phone, or I want you to go visit that donor, and I want you to talk to them. They're struggling. The white-collar worker in the United States works 50-plus hours a week. They don't have a lot of time for anything. Their resources they have a lot of resources, but they're not necessarily putting them in good places. And they're maybe not going to church. And if they do go to church, they're not talking to their pastor about what's going on in their lives spiritually. And this is where I say, hey, we have an opportunity here to be ministers to our donors, to connect with them, to love them. And when we do that and we connect deeply with them, they begin to share with us. And as we begin to share with them, we find out what God's called them to do in their hearts. And I'm getting ahead of myself here. But that right there is fundraising. And when we do that work, we unlock people for the kingdom, and their resources follow it. And so when I say, when the devil says you don't have time for this, I say you have to make time. You have to purposely make time in your schedule to do fundraising, and to not dread it and to not hate it, but to say, this is my opportunity to connect with people, to pray for people, to share the vision for my ministry that God's given me with them, and allow them, in the same way George Mueller did, to see themselves doing this ministry. So, okay, the other lie is that if you just put together this simple giving scheme, if I could get 150 people to give $150, then I would take care of my budget for the year. The problem with that is that, one, they never work. And two, you've just asked the majority of your major donors to give $150 when they could really write you $1,500 or $15,000. So these simple giving schemes are just don't do them. So one of my favorite people to read is a guy named Henry Nouwen, and he had this. I was reading his book again last night, Spirituality of Fundraising. He has this great quote that fundraising is as spiritual as giving a sermon, entering a time of prayer, visiting the sick, or feeding the hungry. And I know all of you are going, oh, that's blasphemy. I could just hear a lot of people saying, I don't, that's just wrong. Just all of a sudden your walls went up. Well, here's the deal. This is what I believe. And this is what I believe is biblical, and I think if you search the scriptures and you think about fundraising, is that every single one of us is made to do something great for God. It's deep down in our being, and a lot of times Christians don't really have a way to live that out or experience that calling. And so what do? We try to find ways in the church to serve and stuff, but that's not really, God's got this great calling on our lives, and it's stuck in there. And what we as fundraisers do is we go and we connect with those people, and we listen to them. We find out we ask good questions, and we find out what it is that God's put on their heart. What do they want to do in the kingdom to serve Christ? And when we hear that and we begin to understand it and we begin to think about ways, then what we get to do as a fundraiser is we get to find ways to help them live that out. And it may not be with your ministry. It may be with Compassion or Forever Change International or some other group. But it's the relationship that you've just connected with them and you've just unlocked them, and now you're putting them in positions where they get to experience what God's called them to do. And when you do that as a fundraiser, you've connected with that person deeply, and they are always going to remember you for that. They're always going to see you as a spiritual advisor. They're always going to appreciate you. And if you maintain that relationship, the resources are going to come your direction. And that's what happens there when you unlock that person for God's kingdom. That is that conversion. And Newen uses this language. He says when you convert someone, and they, not the conversion of, the idea of conversion is that their mindset has changed to it. They've taken a complete turnaround. When someone converts and they're thinking about their resources and their purpose in life, and they begin to see it clearly, that is ministry. So I want you to begin to think about that as we go forward. So all of these things at some level are deep down in your psyche. And you all know it. You know it. Think about which one of these things that I've said is just deep down in who your being is. So some of it might be that you're just afraid, right? You're just afraid. Or maybe it's the Mueller thing. Or maybe it's that you think that it's begging, right? Well, as a fundraising consultant, as somebody who's done this for years and seen God do amazing things in ministries, is I can't help you if you don't change those mindsets. Nobody's going to be able to help you. No listening to any seminar is going to help you. No, reading a book. No, hiring a consultant. No, hiring a development director is going to change your ministry. Because deep down in your heart and in your soul is this idea that the devil has planted there on purpose, right, to take you away from what God has called you to do. And so my challenge to you, in the same way that when you give the gospel, you challenge someone to change their heart and to follow Christ. I'm challenging you today, figure out what that thing is that the devil's using that's part of your mindset, and ask God to forgive you for it. But more than that, what I'm asking you to do is turn and to say, you know what, today this seminar is a new day for my ministry. Because from this point forward, fundraising is ministry. Being in relationship with people is part of what we do. We inspire people to do great things for God. We want them to do it through our ministry, but that's what we're doing. And when you begin to do that, you will begin to see your ministry change. You will begin to see resources unlocked for your kingdom and for God's kingdom, not your kingdom, but you'll begin to see ministries, you will begin to see resources unlocked for your ministry. So now you're saying, okay, so this is, for those of you who are real evangelists, this is my second call to action, right? So some of you now may be doubting, right? I don't know if what he's saying is right. Hey, get off this call and go read the Bible, right? Go challenge what I'm telling you. Read Moses, the book of Exodus. Go read about David in 1 Chronicles. Go read about Nehemiah. And you can say, well, I've already read those, right? Read them with development eyes. Read them and think about what those people were doing. Think about them from a fundraising as a ministry standpoint. Go read about Paul. Paul was a master at this. He not only was asking people to give, but he had like a whole strategy for like how to move a group of people through the process of giving. And he even had like a pledge but not paid philosophy. Like, I'm going to send the brothers back if you don't send the money, right? So Paul was a strategist. I mean, you have to think about who Paul was. He's a very educated man, very strategic in everything that he did. And so go back and read those and you say, you know what? Fundraising, raising resources for the kingdom is part of what God's planning is for us. So, and then what I also want you to do is if you're still having trouble, and whether you're having trouble or not, I want you to do this. I want you to practice the spiritual discipline of submission. So some of you may say, oh, what is this spiritual discipline of submission? This guy's read Dallas Willard, or he's read Richard Foster. I don't know if I can trust him. The idea of the spiritual discipline of submission is it's just submitting to God and saying, hey, in the past, I've kept these things in my heart, and this is the things that I believe, and they've shaped who I am and how I believe. And what I'm saying is submit to God. And when you submit, it creates this freedom to take in new ideas and new thinking. It's that submission, and when we operate out of a place of submission, right, then we can, and so submission, right, this idea that I'm a servant, right, and this idea of relationships. So if we submit and say, you know what, God, this is not me. I'm not operating as me. I'm operating as a servant for you. And this idea of relationships, being in relationship with your donors and ministering to them and loving them and being their servant, right? When we do this, this is what unlocks resources. But you can't do this if you're operating well. And some of you I already know are listening to this going, oh, I'm never going to do that. If you've said that once, twice, or 3 times listening to this, like, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You have to be in the spiritual discipline of submission. Submit yourself to God, to be the servant, and to begin to learn and take in all of these ideas. Because without that, without being in submission, you're not going to be a good fundraiser. You're not going to be able to connect with people. So once you've done that, I want you to start fresh. So we've done it. We said, hey, God, I'm changing my ways. I'm going forward. So when we start fresh and we say, okay, what do I do next? I'm in. I love this idea of being in relationship with people, loving people, and the spirituality of ministry and connecting with people. This is what I want to do because I know that this will unlock the resources so I can share the gospel. Then what we have to do is we have to plan. And planning says, okay, what am I gonna do with my major donors this year? I'm gonna look at my list and say, oh, I've got 3 major donors. And then I've got some people who are giving me $500 a month, and I've got a bunch of people. Like, what is my plan to connect with all of those people? And just map it out. Be on a single sheet of paper. You can do it as an Excel file. You can say, okay, I'm going to send these letters here. I'm going to do these blog posts here. I'm going to do these visits here. I'm going to call this many times in a year. I'm going to go visit them this many times. Map all of that out. Then what I want you to do is I want you to connect with God, right? And you're all saying, okay, I'm an evangelist, dude. I'm connected with God, right? I mean, I'm connected. Yeah, but I'm talking about a deep relationship. And this is something when we did Willamette Celebration with Mike Silva a couple of years ago, I learned it deeply, and I want to share it with you. And we used prayer to undergird the whole thing that we did. And I'm not just talking about like 15-minute prayers here and there. We had like a prayer team working 24/7 for a year. And the guy that led that up, pulled me aside and he said, you know why this is important? I said, yeah, it's praying. We're asking God. And he said, no. He said, you know how when your little girl wants something? I have a little girl who's 6. When your little girl wants something and you're sitting on the sofa watching TV, and she comes over and she sits in your lap. She looks up at you and she talks to you, and you're connected. Like you're that girl, she owns you at that point. That little girl or that little boy owns you. And they can ask for pretty much anything. He said, that's what we're doing. We are crawling up in the creator of the universe's lap. And we're connected with God. And we're praying. We're talking to him about what we're doing. And we're asking him for things. And that's what I want to see. That picture that I just painted there for you, that's what I want for you. And when you begin to do that and you begin to pray by name for each one of your donors, and you've connected with them outside of this in your relationships with them, and you know what's happening with their kids, and you know what's happening with their relationships or their churches, and you begin to pray for that. There's something special that goes on there, and you begin to care at a deeper level for those people because God puts them on your heart, and when he puts them on your heart, then you are compelled to be in connection with them. So the next step is to connect with people, right? So my guess is you all have a list that's probably 50 people, 80 people, 150 people, 250 people. And you're probably doing some letters and maybe some phone calls, right? I'm talking about really connecting with people. And then I'm talking about finding new people to connect with. Now that you know that you're supposed to be in a relationship and you're spending the time that you need to be, like, think about what people you want to connect with and be in their lives. So, and then the other thing is that we've talked about is like this idea of begging comes when we don't know what we need, or it comes that we've waited too long to raise that money and we now have to go and say, oh, I've got to have this, right? So my challenge to you is one, at any given time if somebody says to you, what do you need? You know the answer. Tell you what, right now I need a truck, a 2-ton truck with this kind of seats and this kind of stereo system, these kinds of wheels, because in order to do the skate park event that we need, we've got to have this truck. Well, really, how much is that truck? Well, that truck is $52,000. Okay. And what the mistake is that person, you look at that person and like they can't give $52,000, so you just, yeah, it's okay. Don't ever do that. Don't ever judge people like that. When somebody says, what do you need? Tell them what you need. Always be ready with an answer. Right? You've heard that before. Always be ready. You're ready when someone asks you, what do you believe? You're always ready with an answer. When somebody asks you, what do you need? Always be ready with an answer. The other thing is that you have to get to the point where you can share your ministry in a way that is compelling and makes people go, wow, that is interesting. I got to know more about that. And if you haven't worked on that, you haven't put it in writing, if you haven't practiced your elevator speech, shame on you. Go back and do it and figure out how to talk about your ministry in a way that is compelling and makes people go, wow. Right? So that's what you have to do to start fresh. So as you begin to plan, I want to talk about the different stages of planning. And the first step of the plan is plan to make friends, right? This is what I call, you have to be in a constant state of meeting new people in your ministry. And well, why is that? Well, because a lot of the people that you meet have gone out the back door and left. They're done, don't like you no more, and they die. They leave, they get angry at you. Someone else has done a better job of fundraising, so they've started giving to that group, and they don't give to you anymore. And that's constantly happening to you. Whether you know it or not, people are leaving, right? So you have to be in a constant state of making new friends, right? Now, they don't have to be donors. They are going to be donors if you do the work right, but to constantly be meeting new people and be doing the work of finding new people and introducing them to your ministry. So that has to be part of your plan. What are you going to do in the next 12 months to find new people to be part of your ministry, to be friends with, to introduce to what you're doing, right? So you've got to have a strategy behind that. You've got to sit down and think about it. Then the next thing is to plan to ask. You'll notice that I'm using a pretty normal model here that you probably all noticed before is make some friends, see the girl that you like, you ask her for a date, go on a bunch of dates, and then eventually maybe you get married, and then after you get married, you live life forever, Lord willing, and then you go off into eternity. And this is what the stages of fundraising are. I mean, they're exactly the same thing. So I've just met Joe at the Lions Club, and I connected with him, and he's really interested in what I'm doing, and you know, been talking to him for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden, hey, I'm headed to Guatemala to go do a little, you know, evangelistic event down there, and I say, hey, you know, this is where I'm going. I'm leaving in 2 weeks. You think he would be willing to give, you know, 150 bucks to this? So just getting the first gift, you know, even if you know that he has the ability to write you $500,000, you know, just ask him on a date, right? Ask him for a gift, and you know, you're never gonna meet somebody right away. I mean, think about this in your own relationships. You're never gonna meet somebody, and on the first time you meet them, ask them for a gift. And I think that's a fear that a lot of people have, is like, I'm gonna meet them and they're gonna think I want something from them. No, just meet people and love them and appreciate them and get to know them and care about them. And then when stuff comes up, natural conversation, well, what are you doing? I'm headed to Guatemala for a week, you know, you know, do you want to help? You know, I need 150 bucks to get down there. Sure, okay, I'll give. But just because they give you a gift doesn't mean that they're with you, right? It doesn't mean that they're going to be with you for the next 30 or 40 years. And this is where being in relationship with them, so you, in the same way that when you ask a lady out on a date, you know, you go on a lot of dates, and then there's an engagement period. You know, hopefully this process, you know, lasts a while, and then you get married. And that's the idea, is that you're going to be you're going to be getting gifts periodically from them. Some of them may want to get married right away. Hey, that's okay. We like those kind of donors. But most of them aren't. They're gonna be checking you out, and that's what those first couple of gifts a lot of times are. They're checking you out to see if you do what you say you're going to do, and you use your money like you say you're going to use it. And so, you have to be working on that. And then getting married is just when they become a pretty regular giver. You can count on them in your budget for $10,000 a year, $500,000 a year, wherever you are with them in that relationship, when they start giving at the level that you know they have the ability to give. And then again, just like in a marriage, you got to keep working at being married. You got to keep working at that relationship. And the more you work at that relationship, the more they're going to be connected to your ministry and advocates for your ministry. They're going to tell their friends about it. This place of being married with the donor is where you want to get your donors to. And it doesn't happen overnight. It's a process, but you got to work the process, right? And so they're the ones that introduce you to their friends and that stuff. Now, this idea is plan to live life and into eternity. Is that what we need to be doing is as our ministry goes older, we need to have a place for them to give their estate when they're ready to begin thinking about that, so that they're on into eternity, but their relationship with you continues on. So these are the 4 stages of development, right? I have a friend, he's John Ogle's mentor, and I've kind of followed him for years and years and years. He uses it: find, win, keep, and lift. You may have heard John talk about that before, but I've taken it because those are his, these are mine, right? Make friends, ask on a date, get married, and then live into life and eternity. So these are the processes, and so maybe you can even use this as your plan. What are we going to do this year to make friends? What are we going to do this year to take those people that we know that we've never gotten a gift from, actually ask them on a date, right? Ask them for a gift. What are we going to do with those people who are pretty random givers to get married, right? What are we going to do with those people who have been given to us for years and are in their late 60s and 70s to make sure that we ask them to do something with us, for long term? And can I have the moderator text me and tell me how much time I have left? So the next thing is so I want you to connect. So as you're connected with your people, right? I want you to be praying for them. We talked about that. Prayer is an important part of this. The mistake is to just, all I do is pray without doing any of the relationship aspects. You've got to be in a relationship, but relationship without prayer is you're missing something. So be genuine in your care and interest for people. that means really liking your donors and caring about them, right? Don't view them as a cash machine. And this is, I've missed this, is the way people think about fundraising is that our donors are a cash machine, and it's that time of the year, I better drive down to the bank and get some cash out of the cash machine. If you look at your donors as a cash machine, just don't. Like, stop doing what you're doing. You shouldn't be raising money if you view people as cash machines. They are not cash machines. They are people. God created these people to do great things. They have resources they want to unlock. They want unlocked so they can use them for the kingdom. And shame on you for thinking of them as like, oh, I got to go ask them for it. You should be in these people's lives. You should be caring about them. And if you're not, then you're really missing out on the whole purpose of fundraising. If you look at people as cash machines, that's not fundraising. That's I don't even know what it is. It's terrible, right? To look at people as like, oh, they could give this much, and oh, they need to give this much, and I know they'll give. No, like, love them, care about them. And yes, they're going to give, and you need to think about how much they're going to give. But that isn't part of thinking about where they are in their business and what's going on in their lives and being there with them when their business goes under and they have no money. And, are you the guy that goes away or a gal that goes away? No, you're the person that's there helping them pick up the pieces of their life. And when you do that, that's what Nguyen's talking about. The spirituality of fundraising is loving people. So, and then the thing is live life and open up your eyes and see the world that's around you, the people that are around you that have resources, and love them. Get in relationship with these people. They're not, if you're looking at them as like, oh, they're just going to think I want their money. Just go be in relationship with them. Eventually they're going to give to you, but you've got to be in relationship first. So I think I have like 5 minutes, and I'm going to try to just blow through. The number one thing that you can do here is ask. People give when they're asked, so you go, I don't know how to ask. So you need to raise money, right? So figure out what your goal is. How much money do I need to raise? Then make a list of all the people that you know, right? And put it down on a list. Take their phone numbers down and write down how much you think you could ask them for based on your relationship with them, right? Then create a little document, one-pager that says, here's my vision for what we're doing, this is where we're going, this is what I need help with, and then give them options to give. And there's an opportunity here for you to go to conqueringnonprofitchaos.com/proposal. I'm not sure if that still works, but if it doesn't, just email me at Bradley@Burke Communications, and I'll send you a couple of samples of this. Or I'm sure Dave or Jeff have the Plow organization make some pretty sweet fundraising proposals. So, so make sure that you have a response card with it when you go talk to people. Know how you're going to meet them. Think about great opportunities. Some people or business people are great. They need to have breakfast, and some people you can go out with your spouse and take them out for dinner. Some people like to golf. Some people like to play tennis. Figure out the best way to connect with them. Again, you need to be in relationship with them. Maybe you use one of these things to build your relationship with them. Then what do I say? Well, write out what you're going to say. You've got to think about what you're going to say. Don't go into that meeting with someone and not know what you're going to say. So write it down, think about it, and then practice. This is what I tell people. I do a whole podcast on asking, which you can get at iTunes. But practice. You've got to stand in front of a mirror or in front of a friend or a spouse and practice saying what you're saying. And would you consider giving us $10,000? Would you consider giving us $10,000? Would you consider giving, you've got to practice this stuff because it doesn't just come naturally. So practice, and it's what you would do anyways if you were, giving a speech in front of somebody. Well, you're going to talk about your ministry, so know what you're going to say, right? Then pray, right? Before you go meet with that donor, pray and ask God to give you clarity and to know how to talk. And then start calling your donors, right? Start calling through, hey, Joe, hey, it's good to talk to you. I want to take you out to dinner on Friday at 10, and just get through the calls and set up meetings so you can go meet with your donors. Then, your meeting is, plan on having a 45-minute meeting. Should probably be less these days. Focus the conversation on the donor. And that means listen, right? Listen to them. They're going to tell you everything. If you talk the whole time, you've just missed out on really. Relationships are about listening, so listen. And then make sure before you go that you present your project. And this is when you're at that point in the relationship where you're ready to ask. Present your project. And then answer their questions, and then ask them to give. So listen, 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 right? Make it personal and don't drone on forever. I'm running out of time, so I'm kind of plowing through these. Hopefully you all can get the copy deck later. Make sure that you ask for a gift, right? And there's two ways to ask for it. The first way is to just say, would you consider giving us a gift of $10,000? Some of you really struggle with that, and you know, my recommendation is that on your proposal you take a highlighter and you highlight the amount that you want them to give. You know, that's called a soft ask. It's not as effective as actually asking people for money. And then wait. This is the hard part, is when you ask people for money, they're not going to say yes right away. What they're doing is they're going to be silent, and you've got to sit in this silence, right? And the silence is them thinking about, I wonder if I should transfer that money out of my savings account, or whether those stocks that I bought have, you know, gotten to the point where I could cash those out. Or maybe, you know, my wife's checking account would work. No, I've got that in my check. I've got that. I've got a wad of cash right here I could just give them. That's what that silence is, right? So be silent. Let the Holy Spirit work. Let them figure out how they're going to give you the money, and they will. And sometimes they won't. And be okay with a no. That doesn't mean that they don't like you. They don't want to support you. They just may be in a strange position right now. So say goodbye. If they haven't left you a check, if they haven't written you a check, leave them with the proposal and the response card and the return envelope, right? If they don't give you a check, you make sure you leave that. When you leave, make sure that you write a thank you card, right? And then do a follow-up call about a week later. Just say, hey, we talked about this. What was your decision on that? So the more you ask, the more you'll raise, right? So that process, I know we went through it really quickly. When your mindset is right, when you've gotten rid of all of your baggage and your mindset is right, and you've connected with people and you've loved them, and you go through that process and you ask them for money, and you will raise money. Now, the more people that you ask, the more money that you will raise. The fewer people that you ask, the less money you will raise. So I put the process up here. You got to repeat the process. I actually have a poster available of this if anybody wants to buy it. I like to, you know, just give it to clients and make them put it up in their office so they remember the process. So you can do this. This is not rocket science. Asking people for money is just, it's really somewhat easy to do. I know that sounds crazy, but the process of asking is really not hard. The process of loving people and being in connection with people, that is ministry, and that is hard. Loving people and appreciating them and actively being in their lives is hard work, and it takes time. And that's why you have to devote 50% of your ministry time to loving people and caring about them and doing this fundraising work. Doing the ministry of fundraising is loving your people and asking them to support you. So you can go to my website, or you can, we have a podcast we do every week called Conquering Nonprofit Chaos that's on iTunes. I just did some great web stuff. I went to the Black Pod conference and interviewed some people. So just good basic fundraising information on there if you'd like it. Here are the references. You see Johnson and Smith and Newen and Colson. And then if you want more information, you can go to our website, which is different from the last one I showed you. I need to fix that for communications or listen to the podcast. So that's all I've got. I know I've used up every second of my time, so I don't think we have time for questions unless Dave wants to make that available.
Bradley, thank you. That was excellent. Appreciate that very much. In addition to your website, if someone wants to email a question to you, what email address should they use, Bradley?
Probably Bradley Burke, B-U-R-C-K, B-R-A-D-L-E-Y, B-U-R-C-K, at gmail.com.
Bradley Burke at gmail.com if you have a question. And some of you have texted us here in Portland that you'd like to be able to go back and review some of this information later, and we'll have this available on the NGA website. It'll be posted in a couple days. We are recording the webinars, so you'll be able to go back and refresh your memory on some of Bradley's good points. The NGA Alliance, we hope to conduct similar webinars like this one on a quarterly basis. We'll keep you posted on future topics, but we'd welcome to hear from you on topics that you would like us to address in these webinars. So if there's a particular subject, an area of practical help that you and your ministry could use, contact us here at the NGA office, and we'll find a slot to do a webinar on that topic. If it's something that's really on your heart, an area you need help in, it's probably an area that a lot of the other members would like some practical help in as well. So we also are planning a conference call with Luis Palau in December, and we'll get you the date and time on that phone call here in the next couple weeks. Again, on behalf of the entire Alliance team, just want to thank each of you for your partnership in evangelism, for taking an hour out of your very, very busy schedules to be with us today. We appreciate you all very, very much, and we look forward to having you with us on our next webinar. Thank you, everyone.